Today I'm going to show you how to test for warped rotors. You kind of have an idea that your rotors are bad because as you're putting on the brakes, you get some bumping, especially the steering wheel is going back and forth, or you at least feel it in the steering wheel. If you got just general bumping and you maybe feel it in your seat but not in the steering wheel, chances are it's your back rotors. That said, I've never had my back rotors warp, but often had the front rotors warp. This one, I've got to test it. It's definitely bouncing on the steering wheel. Pretty sure it's the rotors. I'm going to show you how to test it so that you know if for sure it is the rotors and not something else like possibly an axle that's unbalanced or something like that. I'm also going to show you how to do this as a backyard mechanic and you don't have one of those like $200 indicators that measure within a thousandth of an inch how close you are. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it with a jack stand and a pencil. First thing you got to do is you got to tighten up the rotor to the hub. If you've got regular lug nuts, you can just tighten up the lug nuts to the hub, maybe 2 of them, keep it nice and snug. If you've got chrome lug nuts like I have, you need a spacer like a castle nut or a stack of washers. I had neither of those, so backyard mechanic, I just use wrenches. And hey, bonus, gives me something to grab onto as I spin this thing. Next thing we got to do is set up our gauge. So we have our gauge just barely touching the outside edge of the rotor. We want it as far to the outside as we can. We don't want to be touching the rusty rim or anything like that. And I've actually got it tilted up just a little bit so that you can hear it scrape as you turn it. And ideally you'd keep on hearing that and you wouldn't get what we have here, which is gets further away. And the tolerances on new cars are quite close. It's 1/1000th of an inch, which is less than the thickness of a human hair. This is much more than that. This is probably 10 or 15 thousandths. It's out of spec. It's out of warp. This small amount will allow you to drive at about 50 miles an hour and step on the brakes, but anything higher than that, 70 miles an hour, it's going to start bumping and it's going to cause a feedback and it's going to feel a lot more warped than it is. So this rotor's got to come off. Some cars have these Phillip heads, screws in here. Yeah, you're not going to get those off with a screwdriver. You need an impact driver. There you go. That goes in there. And this end gets hit with a hammer. Grab that and you put a little tension on it in the loose way. This one got stuck, so I'll simply leave it on there and screw it back in, and then I'll be able to pull it off. Make sure you use a little bit of brake cleaner on that, just a couple of shots, and wipe it off. Brakes don't like grease. For what it's worth, it depends on your car, but the squeaker, the thing that detects the thickness of your brakes and starts squeaking if they get too low, goes on the inside and up. This clamp will keep these spring spreaders from popping the brakes out until we get the caliper on. I have a socket in this piston, and I've got this caliper piston compressor. Note also the baling wire here, tied onto the spring, it's hanging from that baling wire. It's not hanging from the brake line. And that's it. That's how you test the rotors. DIY, pretty standard fare there, mechanic or not. But one last tip, make sure to keep it in park and pump them up until the brakes are set again, because I spread those pistons, and so initially the brakes won't work. You got to pump it up. If you don't do that and you're in drive, you might do something like this. Like run into your workbench and crash into your garage. Yeah, don't be like me. Don't crash into your house. Pump up the brakes first.